Yeah, it's working.
Looks like it's working. All right, so thank you very much for coming to our talk on Julius Caesar. I think this is a particularly relevant play given the recent unrolls that are and protests that are going on. So I'm taking this as I'm framing this discussion, although Julius Caesar, of course, has been done through many, many different countries over the centuries. I'm mainly focusing on American productions and how I think this play has helped shaped a lot of American history, and I hope this lecture will reveal that. Okay, let's present this. Okay, actually, yeah, let's share the right screen. There we go. Just to give credit where credit is due, this is a bit of artwork done by one of my favorite Shakespearean artists from a website called Immortal Longings. The artist's name escapes me at the moment, but I like it. Please patronize them. So the earliest account, Julius Caesar is unique for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's one of the few plays we actually have a contemporary account from the Globe Theater of a man who went and saw it. A Swiss tourist named Thomas Platter went and saw it in 1599. Much like we talked about last time with the Globe Theater, the play was done at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Cast of about 15 actors, and strangely enough, after the show, they danced. Which was I don't know, maybe an attempt to exercise some of the feelings of tragic pathos that might have been present in the theater afterwards. In my research, I found it interesting that Switzerland itself was broken into many different fiefdoms that all had their own different systems of government, and I wonder what he would have made at the violent revolutions and the upheaval of domestic stability that was portrayed in the play. My argument is that since the very beginning, this play has sparked controversy because of its portrayal of assassination, revolution, and violence. But ultimately, it is a play that advocates peace and advocates an attempt to form a relationship between the body politic and the government. But I think something that's troubling is that almost from the very beginning, people get swallowed up, forget the history of the play, and believe that it is a rallying cry for revolutionaries because of its fiery rhetoric. So we're going to talk about rhetoric, we're going to talk about the play, and a little bit of the history that is not often taught anymore in American schools. So let's start by talking about the most central figure to the play, not Julius Caesar himself, but Marcus Brutus. It's important to remember that Marcus Brutus was a member of a very old patrician family. In fact, his ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus was the founder of the Roman Republic. He drove out the last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, which Shakespeare actually dramatizes in his epic poem, The Rape of Lucrece. In the play, essentially, Tarquin's rape of his matron Lucrece is similar to his tyrannical governance of the country. After Lucius Brutus drove out the king, he decreed that there would never be a king in Rome ever again, and he went to extreme lengths to secure that. If you notice in this painting, Brutus has ordered the execution of his own sons because they attempted to stage a coup. You can see the body is right here. Brutus literally does not look back, and he is in the darkness. Meanwhile, their sisters and their mother are in this corner looking helplessly on those bodies. This is how seriously the men of the Junii took securing the Roman Republic. They valued it above even their own families. Now, arguably, Brutus, so Brutus had a lot of familial pressure to safeguard the safety of the Roman Republic. So that begs the question, why did he believe that Caesar was a threat that warranted assassination? Well, at this point, Caesar had consolidated a lot of power. You see on the left when he gets the king of the Gauls, Vercingetorix, to surrender. His victory was extremely popular with the Roman people because not only did it bring prestige to Rome, they also brought taxes to Rome. So he was making the Roman people richer. He also established a cult of personality. This image from HBO's series Rome depicts Caesar dressed as the god Jupiter. There was a cult to worship Julius Caesar, the cult of Jupiter Julius. And it's also worth mentioning that Caesar has a month named after him that we still use today, the month of July. So he had done a lot to consolidate his own power, to make himself rich, to consolidate his military strength, to establish himself as a conqueror and a hero to the Roman people, and to threaten the Roman Senate by frequently ignoring their decrees. So Brutus and the other senators had plenty to worry about. I love this painting of Caesar crossing the Rubicon from 1875, where he is literally holding the whole world in his hands. He tramples over women and children. I think it illustrates very nicely the conflicting feelings that people have had over Caesar. They love his conquering spirit and his vaulting ambition, but they're appalled by the cruel means in which he achieves his empire building. So, because of his worry that Caesar would consolidate power and become the first king of Rome in 300 years, in 44 BC, on the March 15th, the Ides of March, Brutus and 60 other senators brutally stabbed Caesar on the floor of the Roman Senate 23 times in the back. You notice the figure of Caesar, the figure of Brutus is right here. Unlike his ancestor, he is turning his back when he chooses to assassinate Caesar. He's not looking where the knife is pointing. I mentioned before that this is a play of rhetoric. So now we're going to examine the rhetoric that the two main contenders in this play use. Brutus on the left, Mark Antony on the right. These all come to a head 3 days after the assassination during Caesar's funeral. And yes, I designed this poster to make it look like a boxing match, because that's what it is. It's a war of words between two great Roman orators. This is a little cartoon that I found online from a website called storyboardthat.com. And it illustrates very nicely the rhetorical tactics that Brutus uses during his funeral speech. He essentially says, first of all, listen to me. I've established time and time again that I care about the honor of Rome and I care about the Roman people. And that's why I killed Caesar. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. If Caesar was going to become king, would the rest of you enjoy being slaves however much you loved him? And It was for honor I did this, and for the honor of Rome that I still care about the Roman people. And for that honor, I am willing to kill myself. And that's why the crowd at the ending panel says, "Live, Brutus, live." And amazingly, the play could have ended right here, if not for the fact that Mark Antony came back with the single most bafflingly effective speech in the entire Shakespearean canon, which, if you don't mind, I'll read to you now. If you wish, you feel free to have a little bit of audience participation by shouting out at the beginning, because I find the speech works best if when Antony starts the speech, he has to quiet them down.
Okay. Ah!
Friends, countrymen, lend me your ears.
Run for it.
I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
Ah.
The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it were a grievous fault. And grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here under leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me, but Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. When the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. But yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him with a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and sure he is an honorable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Pardon me. My heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me. Brutus' speech revolves around what the Romans would call ethos. Ethos is where you establish why you should listen to somebody because of their credentials. We all have seen many commercials for pharmacy drugs that are established by leading medical experts. We all have seen campaign ads from candidates who list their political credentials. Ethos is a tactic that's still used, but Antony uses very little in his speech. While Brutus mainly, his ethos is that I was Caesar's friend, I love honor, that's why you should listen to me. Antony uses the same tactic. I am also Caesar's friend, and as his friend, I think he deserved not to be murdered. Logos, which is the appeal to facts, neither of these people really use it very much. Antony's main fact is that on the festival of Lupercal, he offered Caesar a crown, which Caesar put back. But as Casca points out, this was a public performance. It's hardly indicative of Caesar's true emotions or his true intentions. It's a public performance. Antony doesn't really rely on logos either. What he mainly does is he appeals to the crowd's emotions. First, as you heard, he just said, listen to me, because Brutus sent me here. This is a funeral, guys. Please, just listen to me for a little bit. And then he talks about how great a man Caesar was. does. He talks about a leader people have lost. He breaks down Brutus's argument over and over and point by point by point. And then he resorts to even more dirty tricks by showing the bloody mantle of Caesar, his toga, and then showing the body of Caesar. Brutus' Republican rhetoric cannot stand against the horror that the crowd must have felt seeing Caesar's body displayed in front of them with 23 stab wounds in the back. It's a dirty trick, but it was incredibly effective. And that's what allows Mark Antony to rally the Roman people to riot, to mutiny, to pursue Brutus and Cassius all the way to Greece, and eventually to join in the fight against him. There are a few small rhetorical devices. Like I said, Brutus, Cassius, Caesar, and Antony are all skilled orators. That was a skill that they would have been trained at from birth. Shakespeare himself was also taught in the arts of rhetoric. He would have studied the speeches of Antony and Caesar. But what I want to emphasize especially is irony. The fact that Antony repeats over and over and over and over again, Brutus is an honorable man, you, the audience, question it. Brutus can still be honorable, whether or not we question it over and over again, but it plants the seed of doubting his credibility. We've seen this sort of thing in modern tactics. There was actually a New York Times article that suggested that Hillary Clinton, because she would refer to her credentials over and over again in stump speeches, little to get people onto her side. Now, I don't know if that's entirely true in the 2016 election, but I think Shakespeare illustrates that it's not a useful thing to repeat ad nauseum a person's credentials. Now I'm going to talk about show a fascinating debate between two actors who play Antony and Brutus in a production of from the Royal Shakespeare Company in 2012. You should know this production was set in a sort of insurgent African country, just to generalize, but it reminds me a lot of Uganda during the reign of Idi Amin, another Caesar-like figure who was famous for his repressing his political opponents. Let me know if you can't hear it.
What really works me off is that Brutus, this is Shakespeare's mistake, Shakespeare's not perfect.
Turn it up a bit.
Speech for Brutus in front of the crowd. And then he writes to say,
Oh, it's muffled.
no.
Paul, it's you can't hear it.
Okay. Okay.
The thing that really knocks me off is that Brutus, see, this is Shakespeare's mistake. Shakespeare is not a perfect playwright. He writes this speech for Brutus in front of the crowd, and the crowd are wowed by it. But then he writes this like ages-long dialogue with Antony and the crowd, in which, of course, he turns them over. I'm sort of burning as an actor. Can I come on again? I had more to say.
It's just one of the famous scenes, you know, in the Shakespeare canon, and everybody would hear when they hear friends, Romans. It's just so well written.
I come to praise Caesar, not to praise him.
Mark Antony is emotional, but he uses it to his advantage. That's the difference between, I do think Brutus is charged with emotion as well, because Caesar was close to him. He does his deed or carries out his actions. It's justified by him through honor. I think Mark Antony it's more personal.
Believe me, for mine honor and have.
He's a man of honor, and he doesn't try to manipulate the crowd. He just talks to them, tells them exactly what's happened. If he'd been a bit more manipulative, I think he probably would have won them over, and Antony wouldn't have had any chance.
Be silent!
Bring it on. Come on.
His initial desire, which is to share with the people the truth of why he did it, is really admirable.
Honor him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him.
He didn't stick around long enough to find out what happens afterwards.
I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do.
Because you see politicians in other countries like Africa and stuff like that, who are highly charged like that. We don't really have much of that anymore here. It's all very respectable and question time now.
They were a tough crowd.
If any speak, for him have I offended.
Forget the working men's clubs of Bolton. These guys are really, really tough. Tough African heckling crowd. It would have been one of those jobs that I would have said, I really want to work with Greg, and I really want to play Brutus, but who's playing Mark Antony? Is Ray doing it? I couldn't think of anybody better to play that person who you could be jealous of and go, my God, the guy's amazing, he looks great, he sounds great.
No.
And that's what Brutus has to have for Mark Antony, a sense in which that's not like me. He's not like me. I'm not a man of action.
I say, stay here with Antony. Give grace, do grace. To entreat you, not a man depart till Antony have spoken.
We're in the rehearsal room, and it's just as soon as one gets up, Patterson always starts it. He gets up, and it's like, wow, if he gets up, I'm getting up as well. It just raises the stakes. No, I don't think we're competing against each other, even though I think Brutus and Mark Antony do, you know, but me and him as individuals, I don't, well, I'm not anyway. You're throwing some spanners in the works here, aren't you? You're causing some friction here.
Okay, we'll watch the final version of the speech later because I don't want to. I want to keep the discussion moving. So the question is: you saw the debate, you saw Brutus and Antony speak. Who was right? Who won the debate? And this is where I'm going to take it to our own country. The first production of Julius Caesar I could find was in 1770. From the very beginning, I feel that our country has had a conflicting relationship with Julius Caesar. We were founded in revolution, so in a way we were on the side of Brutus from the beginning. But as America got more powerful, there are ways in which we emulate and maybe idolize Julius Caesar. I mean, look at this picture called the Apotheosis of Washington that still stands in the US Capitol building. He looks like a Roman god. And there he is in between Athena and the figure of peace. When at the same time, there's also war at the bottom. And it's not too much of a jump to think of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon and George Washington crossing the Delaware. And it's also worth noting that before Washington, D.C. was so named, it was originally called Rome. So there are... it's not too hard to adapt Julius Caesar for an American crowd. But it has led to some friction and tragedy in the past, never more apparent than during the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln is fascinating because he was sort of a Caesar figure in the sense that people thought of him as a tyrant during the Civil War. His wife actually had a dream that he was to be assassinated, much like Calpurnia. And most ironic of all is the career of his assassin. Remember, John Wilkes Booth was an actor, and his family was a group of Shakespeareans. His father's name was Junius Brutus Booth. And he and his two brothers, Edwin and Junius Brutus the Younger, were among the most celebrated Shakespearean actors of their age. And the irony gets deeper. Just about 2 months before the assassination of Lincoln, the three of them performed in this production of Julius Caesar. But who did John Wilkes play? No, he didn't play Brutus. He played Mark Antony. But clearly, part he wanted to play because he enacted in real life, as evidenced by this journal entry he wrote while he was on the run. With every man's hand against me, I am here in despair. And why? For doing what Brutus was honored for. And yet I, for striking down a greater tyrant than they ever knew, am looked upon as a common cutthroat. This goes back to my original point. Clearly, John Wilkes Booth got swept up in the rhetoric of revolution and violence, forgetting what happens to Brutus. Once he kills Caesar, what happens? He is hunted down, he is arrested, he has to take his own life, or he surely would have been killed by Antony's army. But what happens to Rome? It goes from being a republic to a dictatorship.
Right.
A violent revolution did not work for Caesar, did not work for John Wilkes Booth, and I would argue does not work now. Now, I'm going to take a break to show a 20th century production, and hear me out, because I think this is an interesting tangential relation between Julius Caesar. Even though the play and the movie Mean Girls are based on a book, there are plenty of connected tissues. First of all, they have a powerful leader whose name literally means a leader. Regina in Latin means queen. She is referred to as an evil dictator. She rules based on a cult of personality, much like Caesar, only it's her looks and her status as spring fling queen that make her powerful. And how is she brought down from her dictatorship? By a friend who betrays her and takes her place in the social strata. Katie is essentially a Brutus figure and gets close to Regina, not by her family because of Brutus, like Brutus had, but because of her looks. I bring this up because I think that it's an interesting, if you take the politics out of Julius Caesar, he's seen as a cautionary tale of celebrity. Regina George is essentially a celebrity who is at first worshipped and then hated. And I hope I'm not getting too clear here when I say that there is one person who knows implicitly the link between celebrity and politics, who has a long history of threatening people that he that he perceives as threats. The current president of the United States. It was almost inevitable that somebody would make a comparison between Donald Trump and Julius Caesar. But the strange thing I found is that there's that not always is it negative. To move this over, you'll notice, you'll see this quote from the Daily Caller, a conservative website that says, every so often in history, a man comes along who overthrows a corrupt elite and resents the political establishment. We live in such a time. In our time, that man is Donald Trump. Julius Caesar played the same role in Roman history 2,000 years ago. Is part of this source of the most controversial production of Julius Caesar in recent memory. The production where, in 2017, where they had a Trump-esque Caesar. This production was panned because of its violence when Caesar was assassinated. There, to give you an example, and I alone am actually part of that controversy. When I wrote a blog entry, which I would love for you to read, I wrote it based on an interesting tweet by Donald Trump Jr., where he reacting to the play said, "I wonder how much of this art," in quotes, "is funded by taxpayers. Serious question, when does, quote, art, unquote, become political speech? And does that change things?" I wrote my blog post about the history of Julius Caesar and its controversy as an attempt to examine and answer that question. But I also got comments from people that said, have we lost so much creativity that all we can come up with is to an analogous play to depict the downfall of Trump? Wow, boring. And once again, I feel this is the people getting swept up in the violent rhetoric that is in President Julius Caesar, missing the point of the story. The heart of the controversy, I think, is the thinking that because the Caesar figure is assassinated, that they portray it as heroic. Yet the play explicitly shows the opposite to be true. And here is a video produced by the Public Theater, the company that ran that particular production, to illustrate their case for why it is not a call to violent revolution.
One of the first Shakespeare plays I ever saw when I was a kid was Julius Caesar at Montana, Shakespeare in the Park. And that was kind of part of my wanting to be an actor.
Anybody who works in theater worships at the altar of William Shakespeare. So I've read it and I've seen it and I've thought a lot about it.
I've been studying Julius Caesar for at least the last 30 years. And I guess before that, because I started in high school.
Julius Caesar is about the repercussions of political violence.
Yeah, if you were to summarize it in one line, it's basically, yeah, don't kill your leader. It just doesn't work out.
They're all dead by the end of the play.
Absolutely, they are not saying that violence is good.
I would say that saying Julius Caesar condones assassination is like saying The Shining condones spending the winter at a creepy old hotel. It's not a good idea, and it will lead to bad things.
So my general impression of the plot is that it starts off with Julius Caesar about to be celebrated, and then Cassius convinces Brutus to assassinate Caesar, and then they do. And Mark Antony is pissed.
The famous speech, one of the most famous in Shakespeare, and that is, friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ears.
All they see on the surface is, oh, they have this guy dressed as Trump who's supposed to mimic or mirror Julius Caesar, and then he's killed and he's stabbed to death, and that's as far as they go. But if you look at what the play is actually about, which is about the repercussions of political violence, you'd see that it actually is a terrible thing. It ends up bad for everybody in the end.
And it's also not the end of the play, which is something that people keep saying. It's not the final act of this play. It's literally the middle of the play. It's the driving action for the rest of it.
Yeah, they misunderstand this whole second half with the growing awareness of the chaos unleashed by this assassination.
The vibe when Caesar is assassinated is, it's chaos, it's absolute tragedy. His wife is left a widow. Society crumbles. The people who carried out the assassination are expecting, gratitude, and they're expecting to be able to take over, and society falls apart.
It has been said that it is shocking to see the person who is the current president being depicted as being violently assassinated. And yeah, that's absolutely true. But that's also woven into the fiber of the play. It's kind of the point.
I think it's meant to be horrifying. I think there's no question that it's meant to be horrifying. Particularly because, again, Caesar, the interesting thing about Caesar is that, to my memory, they basically admit that he hasn't done anything. The reason why Caesar is being assassinated is because there's the fear that he may do something. The interesting thing about the whole controversy is that when I look at Julius Caesar, it's pretty much acknowledged that Julius Caesar is a great man.
I think it's just based on a really huge misunderstanding.
I think the main issue with Shakespeare is, and that every theater company faces, is how do I make this accessible to a modern audience? I mean, it's practically written in a different language, and it's been done so many times. So how do you make it topical? How do you make it fresh and new? And so I think the easiest way to do that is, oh, it's about politics. Let's make it about the politics of the day.
Theatrical productions like to dress themselves up with current representations. It helps the audience understand, oh, that's the leader. He looks like my leader now. I get it. He's the leader. So I see the impact when something happens to him. But
I think that that's an excellent place to leave that part of the discussion, because one thing that I thought was incredibly important, and one thing that people have pointed out when they defend this play against the criticism that's been raised against it, I'm not going to show you this with the volume, is that there was literally a production in 2012 where there was a Obama-esque production of Julius Caesar, and there was no controversy whatsoever. He's about to come out. You'll notice same tie. Obviously, he's African American. He has some of Obama's mannerisms, but he's assassinated in exactly the same way as the Trump Caesar, because that's what Shakespeare wrote. As the actress mentioned, and the Caesar figure is an analog. And this is also partially woven into the way that Shakespeare was originally performed. As we discussed 2 weeks ago, in the Globe Theater, they would not be wearing goods. They'd be wearing cast-off clothing from real contemporary Elizabethan aristocrats. So if you were in that audience, you would see somebody dressed as one of your leaders getting stabbed to death. Really, what we're doing is no different from what they did 400 years ago. But I think it is a little bit frustrating to me that this production had no controversy, whereas the production from 2017 had its funding pulled, had protests. People saw it as a Antifa left-wing conspiracy, and an attempt to bring down Trump. And I think that it is more complicated than that, and that it misses the point of the play for the sake of the violent rhetoric that is inherent in it. So having a more complete idea of the story is very important going forward, not only in discussions of Julius Caesar, but also in discussions of American politics. I think I've proven that Julius Caesar the man and Julius Caesar the play are woven into the fabric of American politics. And we can't have discussions if all we're going to do is think of the violence of revolutionary rhetoric, whether it's on stage or in social media or even in the White House briefing room. What we need to do is we need to have thoughtful, informed discourse. Otherwise, this is the result.
Well, I was just thinking at the towards the end of Mark Antony's speech, he has the line that cry havoc and let loose the dogs of war.